Welcome back to another episode of the Overcoming Odds podcast. Today's guest is an author of a book that has changed my life and a book that I would encourage every one of our listeners to check out. It is called 365 Thank Yous, The Year a Simple Act of Daily Gratitude Changed My Life by John Kralik. This book is something that has played a huge role within my life, as I mentioned before, and in a conversation that I was having with John. And it truly is and does start with a simple act of putting together a thank you note, which takes 5 to 10 minutes a day, which every single one of us can afford. And if you're willing to do so, it will have an impact like it has had in my life. So without further ado, I would like to welcome John Kralik onto the show. John, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate your invite, and I'm greatly honored that you love my book.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for putting together that work. The topic of today's conversation that I wanted to focus on centers around this concept of belonging, and more so why it's important to human beings. But before we can get into the broader aspect and talk about the society and the different aspects of why belonging is important to them, I wanted to dive into your experience and really understand, why is belonging important to you?
Well, I think it's important for different reasons now than when I was your age. I mean, one of the things about Skype that probably couldn't occur in an earlier generation is I can look across here and actually thousands of miles, and I see a much younger person, and our hair is so different, and actually when I was your age, my hair probably looked a lot like yours, as it
Oh,
turns
wow.
out.
Okay.
So I think when I was your age, I was looking for a way to belong in a profession, the legal profession. I was looking for a way to try to start a family that I could belong to, that I could feel good in, that would surround me with people who were feeling like they loved me. I wanted to be loved. So I wanted all that. I mean, when I look at it now, I've lost some of my best friends and family members, and you're at the point of life where the people who wrote the songs that have given you joy for decades are leaving the world, and so it's a tremendous blessing to just to be here,
Mm-hmm.
on the planet, and to live, and so in terms of belonging, I think now about how am I going to make my continued presence here worthwhile? Why have I been chosen to stay for a while? And so to really belong by finding a way to make my presence helpful and comforting to other people. I mean, just to be useful. I always want to be useful, to be of use.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been important to me. So that's what I think about when I think about continuing to belong in this world.
Mm-hmm. Well, you certainly have done that through your work. The book 365 Thank Yous, as I mentioned to you in the conversation that we were having before, it's a book that has helped me and has helped shape my own sense of belonging in ways that I can't even describe right now. But one of them is that it has given me a chance to take a step back and reflect on the people and the moments that have created who I am today. One of those times has actually been being able to write a thank you note to my 6th grade teacher, one of the first teachers that taught me English when I came to the States. And so, when you talk about your presence being felt, it certainly has been on my end, especially. And so the thing that I wanted to explore with you is that, how did that journey, for those who aren't familiar with your story, how did that all begin, and how did it get to a point where you were able to recognize this moment that in order for you to reverse your life and a lot of the decisions and the outcomes that were happening, one of the ways that you were going to do that was through this daily practice of gratitude. And I mean, you speak a lot in your book, and for those who haven't had a chance to do so, please go check it out on Amazon as well as John's website. But you talk about the different moments and the different thank yous that you were able to do. I mean, as simple as sending a thank you to a grocery store clerk or someone along the way that helped open a door for you.
Right.
You know, tell us more about that journey.
Low point of my life. I mean, when I go back and measure it objectively,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things were going wrong. I was, in the middle of my second divorce, and I always say that, the first time you get divorced, you could blame it on the other person. But the second time, you got to think maybe some of this is your fault. And I was living in a pretty bad apartment, and I was working really, really hard. But because of a number of things that can happen when you're a private attorney and running a small practice, there've been a lot of reversals for me. I mean, even a huge jury verdict that I was awarded was reversed. And I had a relationship with someone who decided that it was over. And so a lot of things were going wrong. And I just felt like, I really felt I had nothing to be grateful for. I was, I went for a long walk. It was on a New Year's Day, and so I could make a New Year's resolution. And I heard a voice. People always ask, where it was, could other people hear it? And, no, it was an inner voice, but it told me that until I learned to be grateful for the things that I had, I wouldn't receive all these things that I wanted. When I came down the hill from the mountains I was climbing that day, I decided to dig out some old notes and to write one thank you note a day. And I almost didn't follow through because, of course, it was a New Year's resolution, and 3 days later, still haven't done anything. But I did. I received a thank you note, which kind of shocked me, from the woman who had broken up with me. And it reminded me, and I started, and I went on this journey. The thing was, and I think this is true of a lot of people in a country that is the richest country in the world, we have so much, and yet we think we don't. We think our lives are so bad, and when you actually start to add it up, they're not. In fact, I had so many wonderful things in my life that I simply wasn't noticing. The chief was the biggest thing was my beautiful daughter, and just what a magical young person she was. And I go into that in the book. But all around me, I had so much to be grateful for. I had wonderful employees. Well, I had some clients that were making my life miserable. I had many clients that were just wonderful. So I needed to focus and be grateful for those good things in my life and recognize them. And as it turned out, as I did that more and more, my life became better, all the things on the outside. I won't tell you, and I don't promise people that suddenly their life will be a magical series of just only good things. And they do this. But you will notice the good things and treasure them and value them. And they'll help you and give you the strength to get through the harder times. And you will see how rich your life truly is. I mean, there are people who have far less than you who yet are grateful and happy in their life. And there are people who really appear to have far more of what you want,
Mm-hmm.
who don't have the things that you have. Um, Very few people had that, when I looked around, had the relationship and the chance to have a daughter like I had. And I had two sons that I was, wanting to love and be closer to. So I had really a great little law firm. I mean, I had many things to be grateful for. And so while I thought I was at my most miserable, I was actually in an okay place. I
Mm-hmm.
just needed to figure it out.
How would you describe your daughter, given what you know now, compared to what you knew about her before you started this journey?
Well, she was 8 years old then, and she was just a magical little girl, and she looked at life from the bright side. She had a pretty good life, despite the fact that her parents were going through a divorce. Uh, and she seemed to notice all those good things and to appreciate them in an innocent way. And was also, she's always been a little old and mature for her age. And there is a moment in the book that I remember. I'm sure this got into the book. It was, we went out to the pool at our crummy little apartment, and it wasn't heated. Um, which, I mean, that sounds like a whining statement, but I, we had dressed up in our bathing suits, and we were like, man, that's really cold. I don't want to get in that. But she jumped right in, and she goes, come on, be a man, jump in. So we just jumped in. It was that kind of joy in life. And now she's a freshman at the University of Michigan. She's grown up to be smart and mature, and she is at a place where I was, and she is looking around and just enjoying all the chances that she has to learn things and meet new people and having a great time,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I want her to have. So
That's amazing.
she'll be home on May 1st.
Wow. You speak a lot about the book and the journey that you've been able to go through on your own as far as personal development and things like that. My question to you is this. You've written this book. What's not in the book? Knowing what you know now, what would you include if you had a chance to revise that version?
That's interesting. I think that in some ways, I had always uh, shied away from religion, uh, and I was inspired to give it another try. There's a great gratitude lesson in the Bible, in the Gospel of Luke, where he heals 10 lepers, I believe, and only one comes back to thank him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that one who receives the greatest gift. Uh, I think that there's a caution in writing things like this at being overtly religious.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, I was also on a journey to recover from an addiction, and I didn't feel comfortable writing about that at the time, but I did it kind of in understated ways that people who were going through that often recognize and contact me, understanding that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you're recovering from an addiction, it's important in rebuilding your life in any way to always recognize what is good in your life and start from there.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think you did not include that part to begin with? Was that something that you
I
were
was,
still kind of going through internally?
right, right. You try to be, you're trying to write something. I think a publisher looking at a first book, I'd never published anything before, is trying not to be too controversial to appeal to the broadest group of people. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes if you speak of religion in any way, you're alienating a group of people. Uh, and I was everybody I think is a little scared of public engagement right now. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it just the media is something that enables us all to reach out and touch people in a greater way. This conversation is an example,
Mm-hmm.
but it gets utilized by a lot of negative people to attack people.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're very, I think we're all kind of afraid of getting too much out there, you know?
Extra cautious.
Yeah. Because whatever you put out there can be attacked by anybody in the universe. And there are a lot of people in the universe who do think pretty negatively.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice for people who might be going through an experience like that, for how they can reverse their thinking? Where does that really start? Does that start, based on my experience, it starts internally with your inner voice, but just the journey that you've been through, like where do people begin with something like that to reverse what appears to be a negative mindset into a positive one?
Well, I think whenever something negative happens to you, when there's like, for example, unfair criticism of you or an attack on you for whatever reason, there's the tendency to defend yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But and sometimes you have to defend yourself, but you can't become stuck in that negative world. In other words, what I noticed was I had a client I remember that owed me $174,000, and I was very offended by that in a way because I thought I had done a good job for them and I knew they had the money. So, I could have spent a lot of negative energy chasing them down,
Mm-hmm.
and I decided not to do that. Instead, I focused on providing good service to the good clients who were willing to pay me on time. And for me, some people thrive, I guess, on the negative, but for me, you're always better off just by focusing on what's positive and trying to minimize the effect of the negativity and the attacks in your life, and to spend as little time as possible on it,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to be into that vortex.
Mm-hmm.
I think good, at least I believe good people are not sustained or helped by being in that vortex. Some people are, I guess, sustained by negative energy, but I don't want to live in that world.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a good place to be.
Final thought for today's episode, and this is a question that I ask all of our guests, and that is, when the odds are completely against you, what are some core fundamental principles that you always refer to?
Well, I have felt you will feel that the odds are against you a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, I am 63, 4 years old now, and I have to look back, on anything that whenever anything negative happens, I have to look back on all the positive things that have happened to me. We were talking about, continuing to write thank you notes, and literally I do, on my worst days, have piles around of notes I have to write and remember, and things, and I start there. I do start by writing a thank you note or two, and I have. I think we looked at the spreadsheet, and it
Mm-hmm.
was
Well over 1,000. Yep.
1,257 as of today, and you know, if you have a list of 1,200 things for which you've been thankful for over the last 3, 4 years, I mean, really, how bad can your life be? I mean, I have to say that this is, no matter what happens, this has been wonderful. Again, I have that perspective being at my age
Mm-hmm.
that this has been wonderful, that I've been blessed beyond what I deserve and what most people in this world receive. So, focusing on that, I think, hopefully makes whatever's facing you more able to be born
Mm-hmm.
and deal with it in a positive way that may turn the tide. May not turn the tide today or tomorrow, but it might turn the tide next week.
Mm-hmm. I think you are absolutely right. I mean, you do have to maintain that sense of hope, especially when times aren't going with you. But I've believed that they're always going with you. I mean, the challenges are there to challenge you for a reason. So it's whenever you come into new opportunities, or even something that you're currently in that you might be experiencing an obstacle. I've always believed, and this is one of the speakers that I was fortunate to have at one of our events that we were putting on. She had said this. She said that there is an opportunity within every challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And since that day, that phrase has been instilled in my mind and just has become part of my daily routine, where I look at every challenge with that mindset. And I think the faster
Well,
you can get yourself to that point to understand that there is a lesson to be learned from here, then you no longer look at that challenge as something that is completely against you.
I was looking through some things of my father's who died last year, and I found this booklet that was just about falling apart. It was from the 1930s,
Mm-hmm.
and he had underlined every part of it, and it was called "Be Thankful for Your Troubles." And it was pointing out to people as they went through their day all the things that they, were saying were their troubles, were their issues, were their problems. And it was pointing out that if this job that you have wasn't so difficult, then somebody could get somebody else to do it for a lot less money. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
whatever your troubles are, they are an opportunity to rise above them. And so be thankful for that challenge is what this book was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that was a great and valuable lesson. I took that booklet out of my father's desk and I left it on mine.
It's amazing. John, how do people find you? And more importantly, how do people find the books in the book that you put
Well, the
together?
books are just available on Amazon, I think, or, uh, they can still, some bookstores still have them. Barnes and Noble
Mm-hmm.
has them in some locations. And, but, that's why Amazon is so good. Everything is available there.
Mm-hmm. Final.
And, so I don't, because I have a job where I can't have a big, huge public presence. So, uh, I don't, do a lot of public speaking or whatever. I generally keep my public speaking to a few charities.
Mm-hmm. Final question for you. Who are you grateful for today and why?
Well, today I was just grateful for a thank you note that I received from my sister for some help I was trying to give her, and in some ways not succeeding. But she said she thanked me for trying. So it brought some tears to my eyes.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience, and thank you for putting together this book that has changed my life, and I hope it will do the same thing for other people. You've been a wonderful guest on our show, and I wish you the best of luck with your journey and the things that you are creating for your own life.
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and you know, it's just a great blessing to know that there's someone out there that's been helped and affected in a positive way by what I wrote.